Welcome back. I'm Melissa Harris Perry, and it has been nearly 5 years since Marissa Alexander was arrested after firing what she called a warning shot to stop who she said was an abusive, estranged husband who was threatening to end her life. No one was injured in the shooting, but Alexander's actions that day in August of 2010, just more than a week after she gave birth to her daughter, led to her immediate arrest, conviction, and a 20-year prison sentence. Her story drew national attention when it amplified an ongoing debate over the inequities of Florida's Stand Your Ground law, which failed to protect Alexander from conviction just months after the law began receiving so much national attention in association with George Zimmerman's shooting of Trayvon Martin. Now, while Zimmerman did not use the Stand Your Ground defense in his case, Marissa Alexander did attempt to argue self-defense under the law, but her claim was rejected in a pretrial hearing after Florida prosecutor Angela Corey argued that Alexander could have left the house instead of firing the shot. During the trial, Alexander testified to having been repeatedly the victim of physical abuse at the hands of her estranged husband. And while he admitted in a 2010 deposition to hitting several women, including Alexander, he later reversed his admission, saying his prior statements were an attempt to protect her. A jury took 12 minutes to convict her of 3 counts of assault with a deadly weapon. That conviction was overturned in 2013 when an appeals court ordered a retrial after discovering an error in the instructions to the jury, but the stakes only got higher for Alexander when the prosecution sought to convict her again on the same 3 charges, only this time seeking a 20-year sentence for each count to be served consecutively instead of concurrently, which would have put Marissa Alexander behind bars for 60 years, 3 times the original sentence. Instead of facing trial again, last November, Alexander agreed to a plea bargain, which this week finally brought her long ordeal closer to an end. Tuesday, Marissa Alexander walked out of jail under an agreement that will subject her to 2 years of house arrest and electronic surveillance. And while the sentence means she will remain for now under the supervision of the criminal justice system with a felony conviction on her record, it also means that for the first time in 5 years, a future as a free woman is finally within her reach. Marissa Alexander is joining me now from her home in Jacksonville, Florida. And here in New York with me is Marissa's attorney, Faith Gay, and host of MSNBC's The Reid Report, Joy Reid. Marissa, I am so thrilled that you have joined us. Can you talk to me now that you can expect to have some sort of future with a level of freedom? What are you planning for your years to come?
What am I planning to do with my time?
Yeah, what are you planning in the coming years?
Well, right now it's just to really focus on the development of my kids. You know, I have a 4-year-old and I have the teenagers, and I believe this is a crucial time for them as teenagers. They're trying to identify their individuality, and they have peer pressure, and then they're getting ready for college. So I really have planned to be available to them, you know, work with their teachers. That's something I've always believed in. Continue with the development of my baby. And then I would like to attend school to probably to obtain my paralegal certificate and just continue to grow in knowledge. I would like to be able to explore different opportunities in the legal community as far as helping other victims and criminal law and defendants. So in the heart of me is service. I like to help people. So that's what I want to continue to do moving forward. That's what I did when I was at the other company that I worked for almost 10 years. So, you know,
it's interesting when you bring up this idea of service and of helping others. And I know sometimes in our darkest hours, in our greatest struggle, we find kind of surprising allies, people on our side who we wouldn't have thought would have been the people in our corner. Over the course of the past 4 years, in the ordeal that you've been through, are there any folks standing on your side who you were surprised to find there?
You know, actually, to be honest with you, a lot of law enforcement, I found that they, you know, were on my side. And also people from overseas, you know, individuals who felt strongly about gun violence was on my side. So I was just grateful that anybody could just look at it and say, you know, this is a tragedy, for at least the sentence was entirely egregious, but for the most part, just people that were in the arena and said, you know, you never know until you have to experience, you know, a situation where it's imminent threat. But for them to say, you know, I haven't, but I still support you.
Hold on for me just one second. I want to come out and introduce you to Joy Reid. I'm not sure if you've had an opportunity to talk with Ms. Reid before. She has been one of the people on your side here at the network. Joy, I'm just wondering, I know you've been reporting on Marissa's case, if you want to engage a bit here.
Yeah, no, and it's wonderful to talk to you, to meet you, Marissa. Your case, you know, when I was at thegrio.com, this was one of the cases that was the people that were the most passionate about. People were very passionate about you. And I'm wondering if you were surprised by or really fully aware of just how much passion people invested in you. You know, were you able to see that, and did it surprise you? Particularly around the issues of domestic violence.
Right, right. You know, when you're incarcerated, you don't have a connection with the outside that you would normally have if you were at home. So I wasn't really aware of just how passionate or how big this particular case had gotten. I did hear from it, and then sometimes I could tell from the amount of mail that I would receive. So that gave me some type of perspective. But once I was able to get home and while I was out on bond, then I realized, you know, just how big it was. And it was very overwhelming in a really great way to see that people still say, you know, hey, it might not have happened to me, but I care about somebody else. And it just for that we're connected all on humanity's sake was there to just support me and encourage and say a prayer. So I was extremely grateful. That helped me through a lot of days. So
Faith, let me ask you about this, because, you know, we were in Nerdland, in Joy Reid's world. We're kind of, you know, we're doing just our producers and are so happy. But I need to ask you, is it over? Like, as a legal matter, is it finally over? Is Marissa Alexander home with her children, free to pursue her education, her service, her life?
Well, she has 2 years of community control, and that means there are limited numbers of things she can do. She can take her kids to school, she can pursue education, she can go to church, she can do things that are necessary to do with the court's permission, but it is limited freedom for 2 more years, and she has to, of course, abide by the court's rules there.
I need to ask you, Marissa, because on this question of domestic violence, part of what struck so many of us so closely is how young your daughter was. You know, I have a baby who is just a year old, but, you know, the vulnerability in those first days, in that first week, there is nothing like how you feel as like a mother tiger almost in those first days. What do people need to know and understand about fear, about domestic violence, about the way that being pregnant or having a new infant can make that worse? What do people need to know from your story, beyond the law, of the kind of human part of how you were reacting in that moment?
Okay. Well, I can just tell you this without getting into the details of what happened today. Fear is subjective. So to tell someone what their level of fear is, it's, you know, that's kind of hard to do. For myself, being that you have a newborn that is an infant who is in the, you know, the NICU, this is where premature babies go, and to come into contact where, you know, or just the realization that it's a possibility that this life that I'm breastfeeding and trying to make sure I get to the hospital 2 and 3 times a day, I need to be there for her, and for anything or to try to separate that is, I mean, it's kind of indescribable. You know, you go into survival mode. So for me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I needed to be there for her that day. And so that's kind of where the train of thought goes as a mother.
Yep, I understand that. I feel that in my fingertips when you say it. Don't go anywhere, because up next we're going to continue this conversation with Marissa Alexander and talk to her about her reunion with this precious 4-year-old girl